Let's take the scale that every beginner knows, C major. We can give each note a number, which will represent its degree in the scale. So C is 1, and is the home note. D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, and B is 7. Now we come back to C, which we could call 8 or 1. Notice how strongly the last note, the 7th, leads back to the 1st. In terms of theory, the notes are named as follows. Tonic, that's number 1. Supertonic, that's number 2. Mediant, that's number 3. Subdominant, that's number 4. Dominant, that's number 5. Submediant, that is number 6. And leading tone, that's number 7. If you start at the tonic and you go up by 2 notes, then you go up to the median. If you instead go down 2 notes, then you go to the submedian. If you start the first note and go up to the 5th note, you go to the dominant. If you go down by the same amount of notes, you go to the subdominant. So let's say we go from the 1st to the 5th, that's C to G. If I go down from C to G, then that's going down, that's a 4th. We go up to G, it's a 5th. If we go from C to F, that's a 4th. If we go down from C to F, that's a 5th. So you notice how going up a 5th is the same as going down a 4th, and vice versa. Now let's work out the chords for C major. To do this, we start by picking a note from the scale. So we'll take the first note, C. Skip a note, play a note. Skip a note, play this one. So we take C, skip D, play E, skip F, and play G. So that's the first chord of C major. It's built on the first degree of the scale. Next we can look at D, the second note of the scale. So we play D, skip the next note, play the note after that, skip the next note, and then play the note after that. So this is D minor, that's a D minor chord. So we can continue this with every note in the key, and we get this. So we have 3 major chords. We have C, that's the first chord. We have F, that's the 4th chord. And we have G, which is the 5th chord. We have 3 minor chords. So here's D minor, that's the 2nd chord. We have E minor, that's the 3rd chord. And we have A minor, which is the 6th chord. And lastly, we have diminished chord. That's on the 7th degree of the scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So looking at a major chord now. We have a major third, the major third, and we have 3 semitones in between these 2 notes. So that's a major third. And on top of that, we have a minor third. So here we have 2 semitones between the notes. So major third, minor third. So if you have a major third and a minor third on top of it, then you get a major chord. For a minor chord, you have it the other way around. So you have a minor third with a major third on top of it. So the minor third, again, these 2 semitones here. The major third, it's 3 semitones. So in the case of the diminished chord, this is actually 2 minor thirds. So here's the first, and here's the second. Now it is a symmetrical chord, and it sounds ambiguous because we can't work out a tonal center. What's more, we have a tritone between the upper and lower notes. It's called a tritone because it spans 3 tones, so that's 6 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is exactly half an octave. So it sounds quite unsettling. Let's take the C major chord. Now put the C on top and it sounds like this. That is the first inversion. Put the E on top and that is the second inversion. So if we move this G to the top, now we have our regular chord, which we can say is in root position. So root position, first inversion, second inversion, and root position again. So inversions are basically playing chord notes in a different order. In any scale, the first chord naturally leads to the fourth chord. So if I play a C chord, it will go to an F chord. Now you notice I'm playing an inversion of F. Here is C, F, A, and that is the second inversion, because F, A, C, A, C, F, and then C, F, A, right? If I just played the F chord without inverting it, then it would sound like this. So that's just jumping around and it doesn't sound well connected. If I invert it instead, you can see how the notes are less distant. It's much more fluent. The fifth chord of a scale leads back to the first. So in this case, G major leads to C major. You can hear that, right? Now, looking at the diminished chord, this also leads back to the first. However, we tend to invert it. See? Because it leads better. You can compare that to this. And another thing about the diminished chord is, if you think about the notes, it's B, D, F. Now think about the fifth chord. It has virtually the same notes. So this has G, B, D, and the diminished chord has B, D, F. So we can actually combine these two chords. So this is called a dominant seventh. It has a very strong pull to the first chord. When we go up a fourth, it feels like we are gaining energy. In this case, that's C going to F, right? When we go up a fifth, it feels like we are losing energy. Such movements are an essential part of modulation, but we'll come back to that later. We know the notes of C major, right? But we'll play them from A to A instead, and that sounds like this. This is A minor. It shares the exact same notes as C major, but the tonal center is different. So for C major, the tonal center is obviously C, and for A minor, the tonal center is A. Since these two keys are so similar, you can put them together, you can play them together, and it will sound good. So C, A minor, C, A minor. I'll give you an actual example of something I wrote some time ago. Let's have a think. let's look at the chords of the scale that is A minor. So obviously we start with A minor, then we go to B diminished, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and back to A minor. So again we have 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and 1 diminished chord. This makes sense since it's just another arrangement of the C scale. However, let's think about the last note of the A minor scale. In C major we have a B leading nicely to C, the starting note. But in A minor we have a G before the A. It's not directly under it, so it doesn't have the same pull towards it. Now this G is part of the 5th chord obviously, which is E minor in this case. And it does sound good when you play them together. But what we can do, we can take that G and we can sharpen it when we're playing the 5th chord, that E minor. So this becomes E major. Now listen. Pulls a lot more strongly. So by sharpening that G to a G sharp, it's become a leading tone back to the tonic, back to the first note of the scale. So if this was our new scale, we would be playing it as this. This is called the harmonic minor. If we hadn't modified that, then we would just be playing the natural minor scale. So in our harmonic minor, we have this G sharp, but the note before it is F. And that's a bit of a transition, it's a bit of a gap. So what we're going to do is raise this F to F sharp, and this scale sounds like this. This is called the melodic minor. Now, when you go down, it actually sounds major, so we play the melodic minor going up, but we play the natural minor going down. I'll play some Schubert to demonstrate this kind of minor sound. It's a piece in A minor, and you can hear it alternating with E major. Not very good, but you can kind of get the feeling of moving between minor chord and its major 5th, right? Going back to C major, if we choose to build a minor scale on the note C, we have C minor. This has the same tonal center, but the notes are not the same. C minor is what we call the parallel key of C major. If we were talking about the parallel key of, say, A minor, that would of course be A major. But back to C minor. This has the notes C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. It's like a C major scale, but the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th notes have been flattened. So if we look at the 4th of this C minor scale, it has F, right? and that will give us F minor. So C minor leads to F minor, and the fifth chord of C minor starts on G, so it's G minor. But let's apply what we learned earlier and raise the seventh note in the scale. So B flat becomes B, and as a result our G minor chord becomes G major. So hear that resolution, right? Now let's go even further and make it a dominant seventh chord. It sounds like a bit like Beethoven, I suppose. Earlier I mentioned that a diminished chord is comprised of two minor thirds. So what if we have a chord which is made of two major thirds instead? This is called an augmented chord. It sounds incredibly odd and unsettling. In C major, we sharpen the top note G to G sharp. Remember, this is the major third, and now this is the major third. To demonstrate this kind of chord, I'll put a recording of a short piece of mine in later on. Unlike the diminished chord, an augmented chord can't exist in our traditional scales. However, it does exist in the whole tone scale. This is a scale where every note is two semitones away from another. So it sounds like this. It's a symmetrical scale, and again it sounds quite odd. Now there are two whole tone scales. That's the first one, and the second one. Because if we start on, say, D, that's just a repeat of the one we started on C, isn't it? On the other hand, there are a few more diminished scales. The whole tone scale ascends in tones, while the diminished scale ascends in minor thirds. So if we start on C sharp, so if we start on C, that's the first one. If we start on C sharp, that's the second one. And if we start on D, that's the third one. So if you were on E flat or D sharp now, that's just the first one, isn't it? Let's take a more melodic and harmonious approach. A major scale, in this case C major, has a semitone interval between the third and fourth notes, and between the seventh and eighth, or seventh and first. So we'll cut out the fourth note and the seventh note. That's the F and the B, which is a tritone, isn't it? Now if we play this scale, we have fewer notes, but we've also removed the possibility of dissonance. The minor equivalent has the same notes, but it just starts in A. I'll mention modes briefly. Back in the day, well, hundreds of years ago, musicians used to think in terms of modes instead of keys, and there are 7 modes overall. To work them out, we flatten notes in a scale progressively. So the first one, if we're on C, is called C mediant. And you can hear we have an F sharp here. has all the notes of G major actually, but the tonal center is C, because G major has an F sharp in its signature, which we're playing in C Lydian, but of course it's C Lydian, it's not G, tonal center is C. The next one is C Ionian, so we flatten the fourth note here, and that's our traditional major scale. Now the third one is C mixed Lydian, and we flatten the seventh note. After that is Dorian, we flatten the third and the seventh. After that is Aeolian, we flatten the third, the sixth and the seventh. That's our natural minor scale, isn't it? And after the Aeolian is, that should be number 6, Phrygian mode. We flatten 4 notes for this one. We flatten the second, the third, the sixth and the seventh. So that sounds like this. After that is Locrian, so we flatten 5 notes, and we flatten the fifth in this one as well, so it sounds like this. It's quite an odd one to use, because your C major chord becomes C diminished, which not exactly going to get great harmony out of that, but hey. You might notice that this is the same notes as a D flat major, because D flat major sounds like this. But of course, our tonal center, the starting note is C. Right? So that's your essential theory. Now let's move on to talk about writing music, not just playing. So why do you want to write? Maybe you have some certain feelings that you want to bring out. Maybe you want to do something different. In my case, it's a means of expression which is individual to me. I think it's a way to tell your own stories. So what does it take to compose? It helps to at least have some level of skill. I am not a virtuoso, but I can improvise, and I've gotten better at it over time. As a classical musician, you treat a music score like a Bible. You play it exactly as you read it. But it's good to try messing around with it a little. Try changing the time signature, or playing the melody a little differently. Change some chords, try playing around and coming up with some little melodies. Get a feel for it. So let's take Hungarian Rhapsody and turn it into a waltz instead. You get the idea. It's just playing around, and sometimes if you don't know or you can't remember a piece, then just make it up, and it's a good way to improvise. Most important of all is a feeling for sound. You should have a feeling about where the sound goes or where it wants to go. It's not easy to tell at first. In fact, it's more a trial and error approach when you begin writing music. But as you go on, you'll develop that strong sense of feeling. It doesn't matter if, like me, you don't have absolute pitch. If you become familiar with intervals, you'll do well. And just to remind you, an interval is the distance between two notes. I started writing piano pieces when I was about 18 or 19. I had a Korg MIDI keyboard and recorded melodies onto my sequencer. I could go over a bar or section, recording additional melodies on top, or just drawing them in. I had little technical ability and barely any knowledge of music theory. Later I went to university and I still use that sequencer, but without the keyboard. I composed just by writing my melodies in. These were actually very complex works. In 2018, I started 2 piano suites, unknowingly at the time. They were just things I came up with when improvising. I had written bits and pieces the year before. My technical ability was a lot better, but I still didn't know any theory, and I was still practicing works by other composers. Last year, I devoted myself to composing. I also decided to pick up my neglected theory book called Harmony and Practice. Looks like this, and it's a really great book. I can't recommend it to you enough. It really opened my eyes. I developed an instinct and feeling for melody over time. Now I could understand how or why it actually worked. From then on, I've got more and more writing to do. I found that it's a helpful idea to sing at your piano. Play the notes and sound them out, so not exactly great at it, but you can sort of get a good feeling for it, and as you sing in tune, you'll sort of feel it in your head. You can kind of feel it coming in tune. It's hard to explain, but if you do that, you get a really strong sense of melody because you can connect it with what you hear in your head. It reinforces your sense of pitch and melody, and it also makes it easier to transcribe music. For example, I transcribed some film music by singing the notes I heard. I wrote them in my software by matching the sequencer notes against my voice. So let's go back to fourths and fifths. If we have C major, that leads naturally to F major. We've added a flat to the key signature by doing so, because C has no flats in the signature, but F, it has one, doesn't it? It has B flat. So if we take F major now, this leads to B flat major, which has 2 flats. It has E flat and B flat, right? So when we are going up, we're adding a flat each time. In fact, we can keep going up in fourths until we get back to C, and I will show you this now. So the chords were C, goes to F, goes to B flat, goes to E flat, goes to A flat, goes to D flat, goes to G flat, but we'll call it F sharp as well, and then that goes to B major, it goes to E, goes to A, goes to D, goes to G, and then goes to C. Going the other way, C comes from G, and G comes from D, and so on. So let's work our way backwards. I'm not really good at this, but we'll try. G, D, A, So how do we know if we've changed key or not? Well, the main thing to consider is the tonal center. If we have C major, then we'll go around various chords and come back to C. It's a kind of expectation. It's like if you're running around a circuit. You might see various things as you go around, but you'll always come back to the start. So if we take the simple progression 1, 4, 1, 5, then we hear these tonal centers. C, F, C, G, and back to C, right? That's what the G goes back to. So we run our lap and come back to the start. So now let's talk about changing key. If we change key, then the associated chords will also change. We're not expecting it to come back to the original tonal center anymore. And an important thing you can do when you change key is confirm it. This means playing the 5th chord of the new key, because that naturally leads to it. It reinforces it, and it makes you really feel that we're now in this key. So if I'm in F major, I can confirm it. I can make it really feel like we're in an F by playing C. It's not a very good C chord. Better. It goes back to F. Right? Modulation is basically finding the 5th chord, the dominant of the key that you want to go to, and working out any chords that are necessary between this and the key you're currently in. Let's say you want to go to F major, but you're in C. This is too easy because C is the 5th of F, so it leads to it already. Now what if instead of C we're in B flat major? The key F major itself leads to B flat major, but we want this to happen the other way around. So we use the 5th of F again, C major. It's actually a chord up from B flat, but it doesn't have B flats, flat and D. It has an E natural, but it still sounds good. So we're playing a major chord, then a major chord, tone above, and then the 4th of this chord. So say we are now in A major, and we again want to go to F. Now A major has 3 sharps, while F has 1 flat. One possible solution is to take A major as the major 5th chord of D minor. So D minor is as follows. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We sharpen that C, and that's A major going to D minor. So we start with A major and go to D minor. And now D minor is the relative minor of F major, so we can go straight to F major. And then we confirm it with C major, and then we're in F. We could also play A major, D minor, and then C major, and then F. There's no single solution, there's lots of ways of doing it. So now how about G minor to F? We could play G minor to D minor, and then again F, C, F. So how about how about A flat major to F? So A flat major is as follows, and we could go to C minor, which is very close to A flat major, right? And then we go from C minor to C major, and then to F major. And in that case, we were going from a parallel key, right? From C minor to C major. We could also go directly from C minor to F, and that sounds like this. But we'd probably need to confirm it again. So how about E flat to F? Here we have E flat, G, and B flat. The notes of C major as a dominant 7th are C, flat. So that's actually quite similar to the notes in E flat, because that is E flat, G and B flat. Well, the C dominant 7th has an E, a G and a B flat. So we can play it like that. Okay, so one more example, D flat to F. So here's D flat. Now D flat major has 5 flats in it. While F major, of course, only has 1. So they're separated by 4 flats. Now what we can do is something interesting. We can play the D flat major chord, and then we can go down by a semitone to the C major chord, which leads to F. So if we didn't want that sort of transition from D flat to C, we could go instead from D flat to B flat minor. That's the relative minor of D flat. And then to F, because F is the major 5th chord of B flat minor. And then confirm it. Right? Now for an effective sort of resolution, so if we're going to F, we'll have that F on top, and the key before it should have the E at the top, so it leads up to F. Right? If you didn't have that, if you kept the same note, so like if I had C at the top, not quite as strong a resolution, but it still sounds fine. So music is all about movement. It's the motion of going through different keys that gives it feeling. If we were to play the same key continuously, it would become very monotonous. I'll give you an example. So instead of just playing C major, let's put in A minor, and F major, why not? D minor, A major, D minor. Let's go back to C major, so G major. So you get the idea, right? I've been playing all these simple chords. But remember, this is just harmony. Unless we are writing some boring pop song, then we'll have a lot more going on. We'll be writing melodies and using different rhythms. We might not even be using chords at all, or at least not aside from playing them. So we can have a C major chord, but we might be playing the notes separately, right? However, having a set of chords is useful as it allows us to break music down into simple components. We can go even further and just look at the tonal center, because every traditional chord has one. In this way, we're breaking music down to its fundamentals. So I'll give you an example. If I take the Moonlight Sonata, I could break it down into its simple chords, right? So C sharp minor, C sharp minor with a B as the bass, and then A major, and then D major, and then C diminished, I think. Right? So the chords show you the sort of the underlying structure of that. So how about diminished chords? They don't have a tonal center because they are symmetrical. They're dissonant and we expect them to resolve. For example, B diminished resolving to C major. Now, we can take this B diminished chord and add another minor third on top, giving us B, D, F and A flat. if we remove the bottom note, B, then we have a diminished chord which belongs to the key of E flat major. We know this because the chords are in root position, and the first one, D, is a semitone below E flat, just as a B in B diminished is a semitone below C. Right? So if I play a C chord in first inversion, then I play the diminished chord with F, A flat, and D. Then we can resolve it to E flat major. That's a key change of 3 flats. If we wanted a key change of 3 sharps instead, we can try this. Looking at B, D, F, we'll go 1 minor third lower, giving A flat, B, D, and F. So then we take away the top note, the F. Then we have a diminished chord which belongs to the key A major. So now if we play the C chord again, then we'll do B diminished, and then we can do D, A flat, and B, and then we can go to A. Just skip it. Still works. So let's try to modulate as far as we can. A tritone anyway. If I play C major, then the tritone is F sharp major, sorry. And it's very noticeable. So let's think about that F sharp chord. The diminished chord which leads to it is E sharp, G sharp, and B. And we're going to invert that to G sharp, B, and we'll just call it F. And for the bass note, now the 5th chord of F sharp major is C sharp major. Take that C sharp and use it as the bass note for the diminished chord. And that is, of course, making it a diminished 7th, right? Sorry, a dominant 7th. So let's play C major, and then that diminished chord, and then we're in F sharp. It's still quite noticeable because the C is moving up a semitone. So let's try to avoid that transition and put a chord in between C major and the diminished. So we'll say from C major, play F minor, and then play the diminished chord. F minor chord has an A flat, C in it, and then the diminished chord drops that C to B. So that's where it's similar. If we look at the dominant 7th chord which leads to C major, this is G dominant 7th. And so notes G, B, D, and F. It's G major with a flattened 7th because the scale of G major has a F sharp in its signature. Right? But we're playing it as F in this case. So if you consider C dominant 7th, this is C, E, G, B flat, and leads to F major. Now the key signature of C major does not have a flat, however F major does. So when we play a dominant 7th, we're effectively using a note from the key signature that we're going towards. So let's look at some chord movements or progressions. We are familiar with 5 to 1. This is actually what's known as a cadence, in this case a perfect cadence. But I'm not going to talk explicitly about cadences. Let's talk about progressions in general. I don't necessarily mean a key change by that, rather I mean going between chords. So if we think about 5 to 1, we might be going towards a minor chord, right? If we look at 1 to 4, again playing it major, say C major, I'll go to F major. It sounds quite bright. So I'll play an example for you. So how about 1 to minor 4? If we take C major, then we're going to be going to F minor, which is also fine. Now we can build tension by using the third of the major chord as its root. So instead of C, we'll be playing E here. And that works because the E is just below the root of the minor chord, the F. For a 1 to 3 progression, we're in a major key, so C major here, and we go to the third chord, which is minor. So this is C, D minor. It's a very effective movement because we're lowering just one of the notes by a semitone. So I'll play an example. So now we'll take that progression, and after going to the third chord, we'll go to the fifth of that chord. So the third in this case is E minor, which has this scale, and the fifth of this scale is B minor. But we're going to sharpen that third note to D sharp, and then go back to E minor. So altogether it sounds like this. 1 chord, 3 chord, and then the fifth of that, and then back to E, and then back to the start. So let's say we're in B flat major. The third chord of that is going to be D minor, and then the fifth chord, D minor, is A major, and then we go back to D minor. So that's an example of that progression. For a relative key progression, we're moving between a major key and its relative minor, or from a minor key to its relative major. So let's say F major, that'll go to D minor, and then back to F major, and so on. If we have F major, the tonic of that is F, and D minor, the tonic is D. And we have a note in between these two tonics, which is E, and we can put that to use. It will sound quite good. Let's have a think. bass of C major, go to A minor, the key in between is B. For the next progression, we'll use an augmented chord between relative keys. So if we take C major, then we augment it, that G becomes G sharp, and that leads us right to the minor, A minor. Because this G sharp is directly between the top note of the C major chord and the first note, or the bottom note, of that A minor chord, right? So that sounds quite good. We can use an augmented chord to go to another chord as well. So if we take B flat major, and then we augment it, so we have B flat D and F sharp. Now if we move the bottom and top notes up by a semitone, then we're now in G major, and we've kept the middle note the same. Okay, now let's rearrange the augmented chord to D, F sharp, and B flat. Now again, we'll raise the top and bottom notes by semitone and keep the middle one the same. So now that's going to B major. Okay, and if we do that again, we take this B major chord and have it as F sharp, B flat, D. Now we can go to E flat major. For a parallel key progression, then we simply take a chord and its parallel equivalent. So that would be C major to C minor, or G sharp minor to A flat major, or F minor to F major, and so on. So when we go from the major to its minor equivalent, the sound becomes duller. Or if we go from the minor one to the major equivalent, then the sound brightens up. If we don't want the change to be so abrupt, we can use a fifth chord in between them. So with C minor, we play G major, and then go to C major. It's quite a nice way to change between parallel keys. Of course, sometimes keys can be distantly related, but moving between them gives a unique sound. For example, here's A flat major moving to A minor. So I start in F minor, then move into A minor, following an A flat major chord. I'll show you now. An interesting chord change is the chromatic mediant. Remember that the mediant is the note a third above the tonic or a third below it. That's the submediant. Each chord has 4 chromatic mediants. The rule is we take a note which is which is a minor or a major third away from the tonic, and use it as the root of a chord which has one note in common with our original chord. This is called a common tone. So let's look at C major. Now the root is C. If we go a major third below, we have A flat. A minor third below is A. Now a minor third above C is E flat, and a major third above C is E. So we have these four notes. Now, if we look at this A flat to start off with, then we play an A flat major chord. We have A flat, C, and E flat. And now this has one note in common with C major. That's C. So this is a chromatic mediant. If I instead played an A flat minor chord, then this doesn't have any notes in common with C major. So it doesn't count, it's not a chromatic mediant. And then if we go to A, play A major, this has one tone in common with C major. So that counts. So we do that for the other two notes, and we end up with these chords. So for a C major chord, the chromatic mediants are A flat major, A major, E flat major, and E. Now listen to C major going to E major. You can hear it's really effective, because this C goes down to B, and this G goes up to G sharp. Quite a cool sound. And of course we can take that chromatic mediant and use it as the fifth of another key, so we can modulate to A major. If we look at D minor, the root is D, and we'll look at the thirds around it. We have B flat, then B, then F, and then F sharp. So let's take that B flat and make a major chord out of it. In this case, we have two common tones. We have D and F. So this doesn't count as a chromatic mediant. But if we play B flat minor, then we have one note in common. So that does count as a chromatic mediant. So we can see that the chromatic mediants have the same quality as the chords that they're associated with. If you're playing a major chord and go to its chromatic mediant, that is also going to be a major chord. If we play a minor chord, then the chromatic mediant is also going to be minor. So for B minor, chromatic mediants are B flat minor, B minor, F minor, and F sharp minor. It's quite an evil sound actually. And I'll play an example of using chromatic mediants. So take the chord C, we go to A flat major, that's a chromatic mediant, and then from A flat major to F is a chromatic mediant, right? So now let's talk about coming up with some melody writing. You might have been practicing your improvisation and might be ready to write some music. Maybe you're playing freely, or you have some kind of picture in your head, a feeling that you want to represent. So as you play, you can have a kind of feeling where the melody goes. And you can play hands together. Or you might just be playing one hand on its own. And when I'm writing a melody, it's often something with a kind of singing quality to it. It depends on what you're looking for. Now, I've given you an example, so we pretend we're improvising. And then, as you improvise, you come across a melody you like, so try to write it down or whatever. You can't forget it. That'll be a disaster. So here I have F, A flat, and B flat. I'm going to develop that melody. And then I'm thinking, where is it going to go? And in my head I can feel it. I like that sort of sound. Now with D flat, the fifth chord is A flat. Right, so that leads to D flat. And I'll just play you now. I'm going to take that melody and play it higher up. So now I'm on F. I'm going to go to F. I'm going to take it as F minor, and then go to the relative major, F minor again, and then to C minor. But now for F minor, the fourth of that is B flat minor. So there you have it. It's just about taking time to figure out the melody and following the sort of sense of feeling that you have, and then getting the harmony down if you're not doing it at the same time. You can split them up, you can do them independently, or you can do them at the same time. It just depends on you. For our harmony, we're going to be working out what chords we are using. This doesn't have to be in the form of chords. We could play the notes spread out instead. So, say B major. I want to spread the notes out. And if you're struggling with a melody, so you're trying to write something, then you can instead go to thinking about what chords am I going to use, how's it going to progress. So if you figure this out, you can work out the melody on top of it. Now, when we're playing chords, another nice little idea, I do this all the time. Instead of playing it as a sort of block, everything's pressed at the same time, you can roll them. Right? And you can also do this when you're playing in octaves, so instead of like, let's say, you can roll it. I'll give you an example. So, B flat major. Sometimes we can think of a melody as a statement. It might be quite short, just a few notes. For example, the theme from the Fifth Symphony. So this is C minor, followed by G dominant 7th, or G 7th. So we could treat it as a motif and use it throughout the work. It's kind of like a reference, and we can change it around or transpose it. Or we could change the harmony. Or we could leave it as it is. So let's have a go with this theme. This could be terrible, we'll see how it goes. Beethoven meant to write a waltz. Or let me think, can again change the harmony. It's just about experimenting and sort of trying different things out. So let me think of something from my own music. Take this little sort of 3-note theme or idea, whatever. This is, you could put it in C minor, or A flat major. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in between those two. Remember, this is a 1-3 progression because C minor is the 3rd chord of A flat major. Vary the melody a little bit. Yada yada yada, you get the idea. So by using motifs and themes, we can write music which is like a story and links together. Ultimately, it's about what you want to do with music that defines how you do it. And what am I supposed to talk about? We'll talk about suspensions now. So if we play a normal chord, C major, a suspension is when we change the 3rd of the chord. So if we have a sus2, then we play the 2nd of the chord instead of the 3rd. So that's C sus2. And then sus4, you might be able to guess already, is when you play the 4th instead of the 3rd. Which I don't know how often they use it, but it's got a different sound to it, it's got a different character, so everything is useful. And if you were talking about a minor, let's have a go. Suspended or suspensions are quite useful for going in between chords. Not really practice this, but like take D flat major and then drop the top and bottom notes to C. That's a C sus4, and then go from wherever. So when you're writing a melody, or you're just improvising, the distances between the notes, the intervals, gives them that kind of feeling. So like, if I play C to F, that's a fourth, that's a different feeling to C and G. It sounds kind of like expectation. And like, if you take a semitone movement, that can feel quite emotional, right? Then take a big jump. It's just about playing around and really trying to follow your feeling when you do this. It's so hard to explain. I'll talk about some music again I wrote earlier, a little while ago, a few months ago. So I played this to you. And if I wanted to use that theme again, then I might transpose it. So I'm going to put it into C major. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the harmony around a little, and you'll hear it, but you'll listen out for it. And do you notice about the ending there? It went from A flat, sorry, to B flat major to E flat major. I want to talk a bit more about progression and writing a song. So I don't actually think in terms of chord numbers and such. I don't think, right, I've got a 1 chord, I'm going to have to go to the 5 chord, and that's going to go to its 4, whatever. I actually think in terms of the sound. I want it to go brighter, so. But the music theory, it gives me a way to describe it on paper, and it helps me if I want to apply that idea to other keys, because if I know that this is going up a 4th, then if I want to do the same in A flat major, then the 4th of that is D flat major. Same feeling, right? And when you're working out a melody or progression, sometimes you get a bit stuck. So you can go back to the theory, and you can do things that are, in a sense, guaranteed to work. But you it depends on what your feeling is. Does it match what you're trying to come up with, what you're trying to show in your music? So let's take a waltz I was writing last year. I was just playing around in A major. Quite like that sort of low note. And then I started putting melody in. And I wanted that kind of singing quality. So I quite like that sound. And then time to change the chord. So that brightens up, right? So at the end, that was E major, which leads back to A. So I'll play that for you. I'm going to play that in octaves. It's just about thinking where it's going, taking the time. It really does take time. Sometimes you want to make it a bit more interesting. The whole point of writing is you've got something that's nice to listen to, and it carries your feeling, and it's not monotonous. For writing music, sheet music is invaluable. So here's a manuscript book. It's something you definitely want to have. Another really useful thing, in fact even more important than a manuscript book, is a notebook. So you can scribble all your ideas in, your little melodies and stuff that you come up with, and a notebook helps to keep them in one place, because often when you're writing music it gets a bit messy. So if you're trying to write everything in a nice professional book, such as a manuscript book, you often find you're writing something and you've left something out, and then your piece is kind of ruined. So it's a good idea to put it in a notebook as you go along, and then later on put it into the sheet manuscript book. Another good idea is to have a a collection of pencils. Put them everywhere, because pencils are your greatest weapon. They are your god. Put them on the piano, put them in your pocket, put them under your pillow, in your bathroom, wherever. Okay, so let's talk about writing the music itself. First thing, obviously, treble clef. Curls around the second line there, and then your bass clef. Got 2 dots around this line here, and generally we're probably going to be writing music in 4/4, and we can use a C to represent that. It's up to you. And if we're writing notes below this middle line, then they're going to be pointing up. If we're writing notes above this middle line, then they're going to be pointing down. If we have a note on the middle line, then it's actually up to us which way it points. In terms of style, I would say point it down if the notes before it or after it are pointing down, but point it up if the notes around it are pointing up. So if you say I have this melody line here, then I would put it like that. But if I had a melody line here, so the notes are pointing down, then the B would point down as well. In terms of chords, so if you say I've got a note here, I had a note here, this one is further from the middle line than this one, so it's going to point up. If we have, say, a note here and a note there, then this one is further from the middle line than this one, so it's going to point down. Now talking about key signatures, so let's just draw a triple clef there, for example. If we have C major, then there's going to be nothing here, no flats, no sharps. If we were to say G major, then we have one sharp, that's F sharp. And then if we have D major, that's two sharps, so then C sharp. And then A major, we have a G sharp as well, so we go 1, 2, 3, and then the next sharp we add is D sharp, and then A sharp, and then E sharp, and then I believe it would be B sharp, and that is C sharp major. So you can look at the sharp, and if you read the note, a semitone after it, that will tell you what key signature it is. So if you say we have 5 sharps, then the sharp which is most on the right is that A sharp, and the note after that A sharp is B. So this, if it was 5 sharps, we would be in B major. Likewise for the bass clef. So this is C, and now we're G major, D major, A major, E major, B major, and then F sharp major, and where would you put that one? That B, I suppose, on here. Going the other way, if you were talking about flats, then we go from C major to F major, so that's a B flat, and then that goes to B flat major, right? And then the next flat we add is A flat, and that gives us E flat major, and then we have A flat major, and then D flat major, and then we have G flat major. So what you can do for reading this is you can look at the flat before the one which is most on the right, and that will tell you the signature. So here we have a C flat, and then flat before that is G flat, so this is G flat major. If we had 4 flats, then we look at the third one, and that's A flat, so A flat major, right? And there you have it. In terms of writing style, so say we're composing, we're coming up with ideas, and we're using some mod key signature with 5 sharps or whatever, then the way I do it, this is my personal working method, whatever you want to call it, is I would declare the sharps, the key signature, and then for every subsequent new bar, new stave, I would just draw a line there, because that saves time. It saves me from having to write this repeatedly, because it's just in a notebook, it's just a draft, doesn't matter. Now the next thing I can give you as advice is, if you've got like a repeated section, so that is so bad. So this is just forget that shit. F an F major arpeggio. If I was repeating that, I would just put a line and then a line for every time I repeat it. That speeds up writing as well. Next thing is I like to use a lot of what do you call them, +8 VAs. You know, when you play a note an octave up, an octave higher or an octave lower than you read it. And instead of doing the lines, I would just put like an 8 +8 VA, da 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 da, and then your music continues, blah blah blah, and then I would terminate it. So I would think to myself, reading my sketch, oh, these 5 notes are going to be an octave higher, and then after this point I play them normally. And another thing I do is, if it's just one note going up, then I would do a little arrow going up. Obviously it's also an accent mark, I think, but I never use those, so I can do this. And for going down, I would put a little arrow sort of pointing down. And that's a really useful tip because it speeds up. If you're continuously using octave markings, then it takes time to write out. And obviously when you're in the creative zone, then you want to be writing out as fast as you're playing it and coming up with it. I just want to talk about the time signature now. So the number you use, so let's say we have 4 4. What this is saying is we have 4 of these type of notes. So if that was a 1, that would be a quarter, right? So we're saying each bar has 4 quarter notes, and a quarter note is also called a crotchet. So there you have it. Now the number, the way I do it is, it depends on the sort of feeling of how many beats or how many pulses are in each bar. So if you say each bar had a semi-breve, I think it's called a whole note, that would obviously, you're having 4 beats, but it feels like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The feeling, you're just having this one long note, so I would probably notate it as 1, 1. I've never done that before, but that's just to sort of show you that the idea. Likewise, if we had, this isn't a real melody by the way, if we had something like this, then you can see da 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 da. So that would be 3 8, because the main note is a quaver, an 8th note, and we've got 3 of them in each bar. The next tool is a music sequencer. When you write music this way, you're working out the notes without being limited by technical ability. You can write out what ideas you've come up with and see if they fit the context and flow well, or if there seem to be any gaps in your writing. For example, notes which feel like they are missing. When you play a piano, you're concentrating on playing the notes right, but a sequencer is less subjective because you don't have to worry about that, and you can focus more on what you're hearing. That said, some melodies really do have to be worked out at a piano. I like to use both. When I have trouble progressing with a piece, I often turn to the sequencer. I'll give you an example of something which I wrote on my sequencer of choice, Reason. Lastly, for writing professional sheets, MuseScore is the way to go. I cannot recommend it enough to you. It doesn't even cost anything. A guy made a video reviewing it and complained about some of the features. MuseScore, the company, then got in touch with him and he worked with the team improving it. It is a fantastic piece of software. So this is MuseScore. As you can see, I've already got a score open, or 5. A really good thing about MuseScore is the ability to make a sort of palette in which you put the things that are most useful to you in. So, like I've put in the octave up and octave down, and tempo and trill and arpeggio. You know, the sort of things that you use a lot, you can put them all in one place, so you don't have to keep looking through the menus for them. And it also lets you write more than one part per stave. So it actually lets you write 4 parts for one stave, and it represents the different parts using different colours. Now, I did mention earlier on the paper that if you put a note above the middle line, the B, or D if it was the bass clef, then it then it points down, and if it was below that middle line, then it would be pointing up. But obviously, if you're using more than one part on a stave, then you're going to try and point them away from each other, so it differentiates the melodic lines. And in that case, a note that would usually be pointing up, it might be pointing down, even though it's below the middle line, and vice versa. So I've figured out most of the functionality of doing what I want, what I've got in my own handwritten sheet music. There's just a few things I can't figure out yet, but I'm still going to get that done. I'm not worrying about it. I'll show you what it sounds like. It's quite a good sound for a MIDI program, or a MIDI sound, should I say. Let's have a look. And you can change the distances between the notes. We've got a sort of editor here. It's not showing anything right now because it's playing. And you can insert clefs where you want to. So when you want to change between bass clef and treble clef, you can set things to be invisible, so they still have an effect on your score, but you can't see them, which is really useful for when you're writing more than one part. Yeah. And another useful feature is the timing of bars. So when you've got these mad runs on your piano, like that, you can actually change the timing. So instead of dividing the bar, which is full counts, into, in a sense, a sort of triplet, but with that triplet being whatever number this is, I'm not going to count it. I instead treated these as sixteenths and said, okay, I'm going to have 44 of these. So this is 4/16, and this is the other 40. And then, because obviously that's a really long bar, I've sped up the tempo there. You can see that hidden tempo marking, which is nice. There you go. And another thing, obviously the main aim of this is to be publishing music. So you go on, you can export it as a PDF, or you can export it as a MIDI, which is really damn useful, especially when you're using a sequencer. So that's MuseScore. Good job. So that's it for this video. Go and write some music, and thanks for watching.